recording, but he's, oh, here we go. Here we go. Ready? One.
Oh,
Okay,
shit.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. We welcome you to ZappatistaSalon number 2. It's December 21, 2022. That's solstice, and it is the birthday of Frank Zappa. Frankie is in town. He was born 82 years ago, but we are celebrating 70 years of his music on this planet, because he was composing his first piece of music called Mice in 1953, the same year I was born. If you haven't seen it, he sings the piece on Midnight Special, the rock show with whatever that guy, Wolfman Jack. So this is a simple beginning. You know, Frank said music is the best. McLuhan said, we do art to show what our world is made of. And I love Blue Jean Tyranny saying that music is a means of deeply informing myself that there's another world. Music is my way of being in the world. What is music for you? We'll start with Khalil. Keep it to a sentence or two.
Oh my gosh, you have to. I have to go first on this. Okay. Yeah, music to me is pizza and ice cream, and it's a I don't know. It's a hard habit to break.
That was good, Khalil. Tyler, you're up. And thank you for hosting us, Tyler, on the first show on our Tyler and I's new YouTube channel.
Yeah, you're welcome. I also like pizza and ice cream, but music, I think, is my language. I can't speak English too well, too good. So, you know, I like music. That's much better for me.
Super cool. Jez, what is music for you?
Music is life, because things are hard. Like, life stuff is not natural and hard, but when you're in the flow and when you're playing music, everything comes together, and it's purpose. Music is purpose. It's life, purpose, fulfillment.
Dig it, dude. Thanks. Andy.
Well, I sometimes tell people I think music is medicine, but that implies that I need healing of some sort, and that's usually not the case because I'm a fairly happy guy in general. So in a more realistic way, if you will, I liken music to like a warm shower. It just I find myself bathing in it, and it prevents dirtiness.
That was good. You know, it reminds me of I would say to people when I went to a Frank Zappa concert, and I probably saw him 20 to 30 times, it was like your head is a washcloth in that same shower, and he's squeezing the water out of your head. You know, your head is like, okay, Gerry, it's an honor and a pleasure. What is music for you?
You know, I'm trying to think of the one word. The only thing I could do is to describe it. It's basically the only thing I can depend on in terms of always being there, always. If I need something, it's always, I could always pick out which is the music that I need. You know, people have ups and downs in all aspects of life. It's the one thing that's just always maybe constant. That would be the best word. It's dependable and constant.
Yep. Thank you. And Simon.
I think my word is sacrament. Music is a sacrament. It's sort of, it connects me with the, it's like mainlining the everything else that I'm feeling. It's sort of music. What was that thing Victor Hugo said? Music, it cannot be expressed. Something which it cannot be expressed, but is about which is impossible to remain silent, or something. You know, it taps into something that is somehow fundamental. You know, vibrations or whatever, and fractional divisions thereof. I think it's a holy means of connecting with that thing, which is what we're all here for.
I can dig it. That was really good, gentlemen. And Walter Patter nailed it. He says all art aspires to the condition of music. And it's like painting, poetry, film wishes it could be as cool as music.
Yeah.
But this is bringing tears to my eyes, gentlemen. I really appreciate you being here to celebrate Frank. You know, James Joyce was listed in the cover of Freak Out. And he wrote in a short story, The Dead. I read this short story the other day. If you haven't read it, it's an incredible short story. T.S. Eliot said it's the greatest short story ever written. And I think Frank Zappa and James Joyce had something in common. They both forgot to die. So here's a few words to introduce us to get going here from James Joyce that is appropriate. We are gathered together for a brief moment from the bustle and rush of our everyday routines. We are met here as friends in the spirit of good fellowship, as colleagues, also to a certain extent in the true spirit of camaraderie in the musical world. Like Frank said, music is the best. And I think the next question we could go round robin is focusing from music to Frank. T.S. Eliot said, we had the experience, but we missed the meaning. And the approach to the meaning restores the experience in a different form. So what does Frank Zappa mean to you? We'll start with you, Jez.
Well, he means also fulfillment, because his music is so fulfilling and it keeps being more and more fulfilling. It's like an ongoing thing. It's infinite, the amount you can learn from his music. I'll say I have to say something about Tyler, your video you put up today of Oh No. It was beautiful. And I recommend anyone watching this watch a 1-minute video that Tyler did of Oh No, which is an example of what Frank Zappa means to me, because Tyler brings himself into that music. You hear Frank's music, but you hear Tyler, his personality, and I heard some jazz kind of comping and some, it's like it brings it forward. Like music, if you're going to cover a piece, my criteria is, are you going to bring something different to it and retain the intent of the composer? And I just want to give you kudos on that, Tyler, that you did that and you keep Frank's music present. And it was a beautiful video. And I really got a lot out of that. I really loved it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I love playing that tune.
Yeah, but you got to thank Tyler's dad for taking him to the Dweezil concert when he was a teenage kid. And he went, uh-oh, got the Frank bug. Okay, so Tyler, what does Frank mean to you?
I probably couldn't use one word or two words or every word to say it. I don't know. I think I have a different experience than all of you, because not only did most of you meet him or work for him, or whatever, I was born after he died. So I'm sort of coming at it from such a different place that I've experienced it all in one huge sort of clump at one time, and as opposed to you all who had a timeline. So to me, it's just this like ever-present huge force of nature that just like controls everything I want to do, all I want to do in music and a lot of what I want to do in life. So it's unbelievably important to me.
Super cool. Okay, Andy.
Well, I would say that my relationship with Frank's music is very much like my relationship with my best friends. That when I first met them or first heard the music, I couldn't understand it real well. I didn't know exactly where this was going or what. It intrigued me. Let's put it that way. And then slowly over time, you find yourself going, well, this is my best friend. And then it's something that now, this many years later, has decades and decades of history, like with my best friends. that we can make jokes amongst ourselves where just one little word will trigger a memory from 30 years prior. And that's how Frank's music is for me, on top of my appreciation for it and all of these things. But I have so much of a history, and forgive me, Tyler, but I have such a long history of listening to the music that I feel like he's one of my best friends, even though I didn't even know the guy. But his musically, I'd say he's my best friend.
Yeah, that was good, Andy. Yeah, but that timeline line sounded good, Tyler. But how many years have you been consuming Frank? You started when you were 13?
I was 12 and now I'm 28. So you could do the math on that one.
That's a good chunk of time. Okay, Gerry.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking what I was going to say about this because I knew we were going to be talking and analyzing Zappa. And the way I analyze it in terms of why he's important to me is I sort of discovered him and Crummer on the same time. And, prior to that, it's like I was very sensitive, very shy, and I just knew something was missing. I can't explain it. And then I discovered first Crumb and then Zappa. And it's like all of a sudden I go, oh man, this is like the stuff I'm hearing in my dreams, or like the stuff that it's inside of me and I'm not seeing anyone else do. So if anything, it was more like it was a mirror or something that was finding something in me that I wasn't seeing anywhere. I knew I wasn't, satisfied with just life in general. And what, everyone as a kid, I wasn't interested in sports. I wasn't really that thrilled about studying, even though I did it to make my parents happy. But I wasn't really expressing myself. And for some reason, Zappa and Crumb, it tapped into something that I go, that's me. That's like when I heard Zappa for the first time, I go, that's the stuff I'm hearing in my dreams. And the same thing when I saw Crumb, I looked at it and I said, I can't believe he just said that. I thought I only thought that. So it was more this recognition that it gave validation to what was really inside of me. I think that's probably, the best way of describing it.
It's really well put, Gerry, and you anticipated our next question, so you must have ESP. Okay, Khalil, you want to add it now before you got to go run to the car?
No, that's cool.
Okay.
Well, Zappa is like this danger signal to me. When I first heard Zappa's music, within 2 minutes, I knew that my musical life was changed forever, and I knew it was going to be a lifetime study, and that was a burden more than a joy. And so it became this burden, and to this day, it's like this affliction that I'm like, this monkey is on my back. And I feel like I kind of have to know this music. I can't not know it. And in order to know it, you have to play it. And there are no outlets to play it. So you just kind of have to just individually by yourself practice this music. And just even though I, forget some of it here and there, I learned some of it here and there too, new stuff. And so it's this love-hate relationship that I love it so much, but I hate the fact that it always has to be there. And this is, as you guys know, this is not music that you just kind of show up and like start to play. You've got to like live it and get inside of it and get a chart and get a score. And it's kind of, it's kind of this burden.
Hey, anyway. Khalil, that is a well put statement you made there. And I do have a rare videotape that someday will release of you playing Frank Zappa on the Venice Boardwalk for almost 2 hours.
Really?
Just the melodies on a marimba.
Wow.
And beautiful women in bikinis flopping by in the background.
Yes. And
ignoring it.
Yeah, that was great. And that marimba was given to me by our own Andy Hollenden. Right there.
Oh, Andy.
And I was just telling a story to someone who was at my studio the other day. I said this about the marimba. I said there were 2 dead mice in the tubes of the marimba, and they must have been there for like over 10 years because they were just dead, dried out, flaked out little mice. One of them in this tube, one of them in the other tube, but they went out together and they went out in the world of music. And so, that's pretty cool. But I was just telling that, Andy, to a couple of people the other, like a week ago or something.
But Khalil, how appropriate. The first song Frank wrote 70 years ago was Mike.
How cool is that? There you go. How cool
70
is
years.
that?
Okay.
I mean, we could turn the Zoom off right now and have a success. So that's
Okay, Simon, you're up.
I'm so glad I come last because it gives me a time to marshal my thoughts. I'm impressed by everybody else's sort of acuity in that regard. I'd just like to say one thing before I say the magic word, just that, in terms of one's engagement with this huge body of work, I don't think that whether or not you came to it in real time or had the opportunity to have any interaction with Frank or whatever really matters at all in terms of the enormity of what it is. I think it's, it's like any great artist. It's available to you if you take the time to just go into it and see what it is. So, I don't think you, Tyler, for example, should think of yourself as being in any way disadvantaged by coming to it later on. In fact, you possibly bring a fresher perspective to it because you don't carry baggage, maybe. Anyway, so what is Frank Zappa? What is the word that was coming to me was a portal. It's kind of a portal to enter, and or simultaneously a sort of a skeleton key. It kind of gives you the keys to the kingdom of almost any other kind of music you want to engage with, and many types of music that I have engaged with only through his intercession, if you can put it like that. The way in which he just seamlessly segs between things, and the way in which there is that thread that is just quintessentially Zappa, that whatever he did and however well he manages to kind of recreate a different genre and almost do it better than the original, somehow there is a thread, a magic purple thread that runs through it that is the Zappa thing, that is a kind of an algorithm that just won't take any shit. So the moment anything starts to get its hair starts to get too long at the back, kind of thing, it's sort of he will discombobulate it so that you have a kind of a way. It's like a template for taking on anything musical, and not just musical. It's a much bigger thing than that. And I thank him, for many things, but that's possibly the greatest thing that I take.
Yeah,
from
let's thank Frank. What a way to this poetry. Thank Frank. But let's get go ahead, Andy.
I'm just going to follow up and say I would add that for me, Frank just proved to me that there were possibilities I'd never considered. That you have to be shown that something is possible, I think, for you to even understand it. And then once I first started listening to his music, that you could write that kind of music at all, and that you could get people to play it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just opened up the world of possibilities and what can be done. But I'd also like to just raise the point that I sometimes ask myself on the notion of being influenced by Frank Zappa, how much, why do I love him so much? Is it because these things were already inside of me and I'm recognizing in him as well? Or am I a bit of a sponge and he's influencing me in ways that I'm kind of then parroting the things that he's already taught me? And I go back and forth on this, and there's got to be a reason that you feel so in such a simpatico relationship with a person like that. And I don't know where that, like Simon said, the portal, and I think the portal is open in both directions, in all honesty. That it's partly me and it's partly him teaching me that makes it so satisfying.
Really well. Oh, go ahead, Simon.
I'm just going to say, I think it's sort of also about, part of the deconstruction algorithm, if you like, which is sort of like tearing down every time there's a box. I just read something that James Lovelock said, and I mentioned this to Tyler there ago, that somebody once said to James Lovelock, how are you so always, it seems like everything you do, you always seem to be able to think outside the box, right? And James Lovelock just said, what box? That's like Frank for me. It's like there are no boxes. It's just he's somehow able to just educate you, if you want to put it like that, but it's sort of stepping outside and by the same token somehow being given permission to be yourself, because you might have had this kind of like weird sort of life or thought or whatever, and suddenly he's written a song about it, or just given you permission to be yourself. I mean, that's kind of what part of what that's about for me.
Really well put, Simon and Andy too, everyone. What Frank taught me was to embrace contradiction, like nothing is what I want. What a mantra. And the word portal is used by Joyce. He said, mistakes are the portals to discovery. So, you know, Frank saying, I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure, really resonates with me. Another thing you brought up, Andy, is exactly what Gail articulated so well, and so many people articulated well, is that Frank brought out in them something they didn't even know they had in them. So he knew how to see, you know, Shuggy's bass playing when he was a guitar player and bring out a bass playing in him, or whatever. These people don't know that it's in them, and he somehow helps pull it out of them. That the purple thread's all about conceptual continuity, and it's really connecting the dots and pattern recognition that he was such a talent at. So let's get fucking neat. Oh, go ahead.
Just go also in terms of just giving yourself permission to be yourself. I mean, think of George Duke and that famous story about, you know, I didn't go to the Juilliard just to play the fucking blues. You know, it's like he's the most cool blues player on the planet. I mean, he just that came out of it.
No, it was. I didn't go to. I didn't play jazz to play ice cream changes.
Can I say something about
Yeah, go ahead, Jazz.
Something about the portal that it just kind of triggered something with me. First of all, Tyler, I was 12 when I first heard Frank Zappa. And it was, I know we'll talk about it later, but it was the Grand Wazoo and Waka Jawaka. But I guess I was 15 when I saw my first show. And it was a portal opening up, and it was George Duke entering my mind and my head by singing the funny little notes and playing that bluesy stuff. And it never left. Like, I went into that portal, and the music they played that day, which I guess is a lot of Roxy stuff. It was at Lincoln Center in New York. I remember hearing Inca Roads. Would that have been possible at that point? A couple of years before it came out, maybe, I'm not sure. Florentine Logan, but it was a portal.
He first did it in 73, I think.
Yeah, it was 73, and it 73. Yeah, it was a portal because something was awakened within me that I didn't know was there, and I wanted to go there and learn as much about it and become a better musician all around. You know, just I got so much out of it, but it was a portal. It's a great word. And George Duke entered my consciousness, and Frank entered it, and neither one of them ever left, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's
thing, you know.
That's George quoting shortening bread in the middle of Rapunzel. That's the fucking blues. He comes from a blues, but it is funny. I didn't mean to correct you, Simon, but it is funny what Frank was able to do to us all who had encounters with him. But let's get knee deep in the swamp muck. This is the real shit right here. Okay, so we know this Waka Wazoo thing came out, and Aaron on the Aaron channel, if you haven't watched the 4 minutes, there's two really key things in his 4 minutes about this, Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo. He plays a tape of Frank actually saying, when Grand Wazoo did tour, there were some reel-to-reel tape made. There's live recording, but they will never come out. The quality of the tape is not that good. They are more like souvenirs than real recordings. Okay, you know, and Lily Tomlin said it so well. Reality's just a collective hunch. So what is real? You know, what a real recording. So we'll start with you.
A reel-to-reel recording.
Yeah, reel-to-reel recording. So I think, and I'm going to say a statement that has a bias, but again, I know there's other ways to think about it, that it's not for us to release stuff that Frank didn't do. That this is like going into a vault that he held because he wanted to, and we're taking stuff out and, well, not they're selling it. And of course it's a learning tool, but isn't that crossing, you know, a line in respect to the artist? If you listen to your mouth, like I did, take one, you hear Sal Marquez and Chris Peterson singing this amazing song as a gospel blues shuffle. When Frank released it, it's no longer that. It's way beyond that. It ruined it. Of course, I loved hearing it, but I don't want to hear this shit before. I want to remain in regards to what a great filmmaker who had a Oscar nominee last year, my friend Jay Rosenblatt, said when I asked him, how did Chris Marker's film Sans Soleil affect him? How did it influence him? He says, it's how I imagined he made it. So Tyler would have to imagine how your mouth was made. And he didn't go, no, I don't have to imagine it. I can go to the take that people released after Frank was dead, who specifically said they will never come out. Hello, that's a way of him saying, don't release this shit, people, after I'm dead. He's saying they will never come out. Now, we know this is an issue with all great art. The people, you know, who release this stuff after. So I'll end my rant with Lillian Hellman. Of course, Frank could have changed. She said, people change and forget to tell you they changed. So, you know, we could say, well, we could talk Frank into it now. You know, somebody needs to make the money. The guy's office is right over here in Santa Monica, Bruce Reznok. He owns Frank now. Well, you know, Universal owns Frank. They can do whatever they want. Of course, well, maybe Amit gives a little permission here or there. You know, most of us know what he did with the Valley Girl video. So we'll start with, and again, Khalil thought it was cool. Some people say it sucks, whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So we'll start with you, Simon. Do we have permission to release Frank's stuff if he specifically says they will never come out?
Well, maybe, you know, one can say, what did he actually mean when he said they will never come out? Did he mean I will never release them? Or did he mean they should never be released? I think there's, you know, if one wants to be legalistic about it, there's sufficient kind of blue water between those two possibilities that you could massage it one way or the other. But in terms of my own personal feeling about it, I think that it's as legitimate as it is to have an X-ray of Leonardo da Vinci's early painting and discover that he actually didn't start out painting the Mona Lisa. It was something else he was going to do, and it kind of evolved over time, and where we are where we are. And Frank, I think, could give a shit at this point. I think he signed off on it when he died, basically. So those of us who are willing to appreciate it for what it is, and those of us who are maybe studying it or will continue to study it, will find it a very informative resource. And if it makes sense for Universal to keep on putting it out, and somebody, I guess, has to turn a buck for that to happen, then put it out. I'm not, having said that, I personally can't listen to too much of it because I've got what I needed from it. I already got the skeleton key kind of thing. I don't need it too much more. I can't deal with too many more wonderful moments because they're already sort of kind of in there. But I think it ought to be accessible. I mean, even if it's only as a resource ultimately for scholars, that, you know, somebody should have the keys to the kingdom. I don't see why, you know, you get, I mean, it's bad enough already when, as an artist, when you release a work of art, it's no longer what you thought it was. It's whatever everybody else thinks it was. So I'm relaxed about it, as they say.
Very cool. Okay, Gerry.
You know, it's an interesting question, Gerry, because I think of it more from a spiritual point of view, in the sense that I've always told people, I don't think I think when people are creating, they're really channeling. And so whether you're doing a music or you're doing a piece of art, you're sort of, you have to be born with the gift to be able to be talented in something. But in terms of these inspiration ideas, I really do believe you're channeling from whatever collective unconscious is out there. So my feeling is, I don't think he has a right to the creation of it, because I think he was helped by a ton of energy on the other side. He doesn't, he channeled it. He put it out there. His family's going to get money from it. It's fine. I have no problem with it because he doesn't own it. He doesn't own the creative process of it. Now, having said that, I agree with you. I haven't liked anything that I've heard released where it was the unfinished version, because I think Zappa knew when it would be done. And the thing that you sent yesterday of your mouth, yeah, I hated it because the best part of it, for me, the best part of that song is that middle section with the scat singing and the piccolo doubling it. That, I mean, that's like, where did that idea come from? It's brilliant. And that's the whole reason for that song. Plus all that Sal Marquez, you know, da 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 in between all the verses. That's what makes the song. They were all missing on the original one. So also from an educational point of view, it's great to hear how he builds it, and he realizes he starts from a lump of clay, and you know, as everyone does, and he finesses it and fine tunes it. So
yeah, I would say that was so well put, because you're fucking with his masterpiece. And I agree with what you guys are saying, but that's like when Frank put out Beat the Boots, I worked for him and I said, this is lame, because a kid goes into a record store and buys Beat the Boots and puts it on and go, this guy doesn't care about his sound quality. This recording sucks. So a kid goes and buys Wiki Walkie or whatever it's fucking called. Goes, this is just a blues gospel shuffle. And they never got what the artist intended. So again, I'll remain stalwart in my, but I appreciate all your attempts to convince me otherwise. Andy, go ahead, Simon.
Just to say, I think the price point kind of militates against any kind of young kid randomly running into wazoo, you know, whack a wazoo or whatever. It's like, you've got to be pretty committed to sort of pony up the kind of level of bucks that would gain you access to that world. So I doubt there are many people coming naive.
No, not true, Simon. Any kid can go on YouTube and hear
Streaming. It's streaming.
It's free. It's the first track you ever hear by Frank Zappa is Your Mouth Take One. Fuck, that's horrible. You're not hearing Frank. That's not Frank. That's somebody going and not obeying Frank's thoughts. Like, I'm an artist, don't release my shit, you know. Anyways, Andy, you're up.
Well, I think a couple factors are technology has advanced to the point that some things that didn't seem releasable years ago are releasable now, like the Roxy film, for example, that he didn't have the technology to finish that then, but they are able to finish it. And so that, I don't know how you feel about it. Perhaps you think that it should have not been released. Anyway, I think that it's been a mixed bag of stuff that's come out. There was some stuff that came out on the 200 Motels box set that I love. And I would hate to think that I would have gone to my grave having not heard like Defeated Gazelle or what's the name of your group. But there's some stuff that I think Frank would roll over in his grave.
Yeah, hello.
I think, in all honesty, I think the example of that bugs me the most is that very, very, very immature version of what became Take Your Clothes Off When You Dance. And he sings, I'm so happy I could cry. Do you know that version?
Yeah.
Like he says, talks about going out in this great big world and falling in love. And I'm so happy I could cry. That is such an immature Frank Zappa lyric that I understand why he changed it and did not release the original version, but I find it embarrassingly bad. And I see people, you know, posting that on Facebook. I'm going, of all the Frank Zappa music in the world, you go back and you grab that? Why are people liking that?
But Andy,
I'm not insulting anybody who loves that, but I think that's
that's fine. Insult on, dude. But here's the big question follow-up for you, Andy, is it worth it more to enable people to mishear him than it is to hear him as an artist? Which way would you lean more towards?
I lean more toward putting it out and and my being able to hear the best stuff. Like, was Occam's Razor, ever released, before Frank died?
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? That there are things that have come out that I'm like, oh, thank the Lord, I get to hear this.
Yeah.
So I value the good stuff so much that I'd say, yeah, let me give it to me.
Go ahead, Simon.
Just simply to say on like, for example, I haven't heard what you're talking about, the early version of Take Your Clothes Off When You Dance, but just, early versions of lyrics and the emergence of that stuff. There's one line that I found in the vault way back when, and I don't know if it's ever been released in any of the stuff that's come out, but it's an early version of Information Is Not Knowledge. And it ends with, happiness is the opiate of the people. That is the final line. I've got a picture of that, so I actually snuck a photo of that. I just thought that is, but I mean that is a very interesting take on where he's coming from in terms of the whole monk business, if one can put it like that. And happiness is the opiate of the people. Whoa, that's a good line. Now, he took that out, and why did he take that out? Well, we can.
And then you're saying that was the last line in the manifesto?
Yes.
That got edited out.
Well, I think there's information
You're
to be
fucking
gained.
with the artist, dude. You're fucking with the artist. It's not fair. Go ahead, Andy.
I'm just going to say, I think that there's information to be gleaned from being able to view his decision-making process. Things that were in early versions, or like you mentioned, hearing Inca Roads back in 1973, you can hear that song going through various versions until it comes out on One Size Fits All. And so I find that interesting. So I'm glad to be able to hear those earlier.
Right. But I'm specifically talking, and you're up next, Tyler. So get ready, because I'm dying to hear what you say about that. But listen, we could, get to the truth about taping Zappa shows. Everybody had some sense that you could sneak a tape recorder in and tape it. The Dead said, just tape it. I'm not going to hassle you. Frank says they're going to tape it because they're bootlegging. No, they weren't necessarily bootlegging, meaning I'm going to buy it. I'm going to make it and sell it. They were doing it. I'm going to listen to it as a live event and study your music. I'm not against studying music and taping. I'm talking about releasing it as a product with Frank's name on it. This is like they did with Orson Welles' Other Side of the Wind. They put his name on it, directed by, it's not directed by him. It doesn't matter. They had the screenplay, they had all the footage. It's not directed by him. It's made by people who think they're getting it. David Porter hung out with Frank Zappa.
Presenting it is by Frank Zappa. They're just saying this is stuff that we found in the vault that relates to the work.
The product says Waka Wiki Frank Zappa. It doesn't say, made by.
Okay, but
whatever. But it's like David Porter, my friend, went to Frank's house and talked to him. He was the foremost Charles Ives expert in the world. And when Ives died, everyone in the Ives world knew it, and they gave him an unfinished symphony and said, here, you finish it. So, you play like you know so much about Ives, now you finish it. So, anyways, Tyler, you got the question, you're up.
Yeah, those of you that know me know that I get really into details, probably way too hard. So yeah, I'm way too curious. I when they release stuff like this, I pour over it and I get way too into everything. But that's part of Zappa that I love so much. That, like you brought up Inca Roads, that's probably the best example where you could hear that song maybe in a span of 2 weeks or something, and it sounds like a completely different thing. That's always been so interesting to me. So I love that you can do that, and there's all that really cool stuff. Having said that, I wish they actually wouldn't do this. So I feel both ways. I actually don't want them to do that, but I really like listening to it. And I don't have another solution for it. I don't know if there's some way that you can tell people.
Why don't you want them to do it?
Because I agree. I don't think that's what you should really be listening to, actually. Like if you wanted to listen to Frank, I think it's really fair to hear what he put out himself.
yeah.
That's
Like-
why we're saying this live on YouTube, and it's going to be on YouTube forever. So someone's voicing this. No one's going to voice this, really. I don't know if some of you listen to everything that comes out on YouTube. It's immense people analyzing Frank, but it's really, to go back to Gary's word, analyzing. We're not analyzing Frank. This is a format called the Zappa Bitch Club. This is a play I wrote many years ago where the 10 great Zappa people sit around and bitch about Frank. And Frank is the only person in the audience. And then he writes a review of the play. But it's respectful bitching. It's like Frank. He reverently satirized what he loves the most. So finally, I got someone to agree with me. Thank you, Tyler. Go ahead.
I can't say this story. I can't say who said this, and I don't want to name drop also without sounding like a jerk, but someone who's like a well-known person said to me, he was like talking about when they released the Baby Snake shows, all of those at the Palladium. And he was like, man, this guitar is way out of tune. Why would they ever think about releasing this? And I was like,
I know who
Yeah.
that could be. Same guy who said Jimi Hendrix played an out of tune guitar, but he
That's
fucking
right.
played it great. Give me a break. I don't care if it's in tune or out of tune. He played it great. Okay, Jez, you're up, and then Khalil, you're up. If you get the sense of what we're talking about, I'll recap.
I just wanted to say something. Andy mentioned the 200 Motels collection, and I think I have it right. Is it Strictly Gentile that he goes into the Inca Roads theme and the solo? Like, I love getting to hear that. I mean, because it shows conceptual continuity, and Strictly Gentile is one of the most beautiful pieces ever, and that section fits perfectly with it. Now, as far as the new thing, it's interesting that he didn't want Winterland released. I actually haven't really gravitated towards Winterland. I listened to a little of it, but I love the Grand Wazoo so much, and I love Ainsley's drumming, and Jim Gordon's fantastic as well. But there was just something about those recordings. I don't quite understand the alternate mixes. I'm hoping one of you can explain them to me, what the differences are. But I was feeling like I was hearing some different Don Preston Moog stuff, or maybe some alternate takes, and I enjoyed hearing that very much. But the whole thing of this won't be released ever, it reminds me of Prince having such control over his stuff in his lifetime, but then he didn't leave any instructions afterwards, so it's fair game in a way. But I see both sides of this thing. I like hearing some of the works in progress just as study aids in a way, but nothing compares with the way he finished them, and those should be the ultimate. Are the finished products.
Yeah.
Khalil, you can't have two. Okay, but listen, there's a little misunderstanding. I'm not.
Recording in progress.
No, Khalil, you gotta kill one of your. Okay, I'm not against study guides going into archives, as a what's called a researcher. I'm not against research, but when you release a product with someone's name, you better make it clear. Frank didn't do that on Beat the Boots, which was I said, what are you going to do? You're going to put a sticker on the Beat the Boots box and say, these recordings were released as bootlegs and now I'm getting the money. And then all the new bootleggers could do is make a copy of that and put them on their new bootlegs. So it's like, it's all about packaging, which Frank was involved with from day one. So he's, if you're going to release stuff, make sure it's really clear on the packaging that it isn't the artist who made this. So Khalil, did you get the gist of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I was really in a crunch there. I had got the car out of the shop and made it all the way back during that whole round of answers. So I'm happy to be home. But the thing that came to my mind was Frank apparently on his deathbed told Ike to play, quote unquote, play my music. And I think that's been a source of great consternation and controversy among the camps, it seems, because Ike took that literally to play my music, and I think that means by all means necessary. And whereas Gail was quick to kind of shut down any attempt to do that, it seemed, for years. And how you can have that kind of dichotomy, you know, it was always kind of frustrating and interesting at the same time. And you always kind of wondered if it was financially motivated or what the motivations behind certain camps were.
But Khalil, I have to interrupt because Fred Gale also disobeyed. He said, get out of the music business, sell my catalog and get out of the music business. So there he is implying, sell it to someone and they'll make the decisions. I'm dying.
Well,
But
he also said,
she disobeyed, which is fine. She, you know, so
well,
she
says they got the money. He said, enjoy the money. He said that to Gail. So enjoy the money. So, I mean, he knew that the stuff was up for grabs and for out there. You know, he just seemed like he was done when he's the kind of guy that doesn't want to care about how he's remembered. He doesn't care about, you know, when he was done, he was done. And I think he was able to kind of release his, you know, grasp on the music. He knows he had a lot of fans out there would probably love to hear it. He knows that he can make money off of it for his family. And he said, enjoy the money. I thought that was great. And so if you're telling enjoy the money, it means the music is out there to be played.
Right. But again, that's not giving people permission to release things and say, this is a Frank Zappa product, as opposed to saying, this is a Frank Zappa rehearsal of a song that became a product that he made. He made 60 albums. That's all we need. And we can wallow in those till the end of time. But, you know, your love for these other takes is great, and I love it, but I'm just saying labeling. So I guess this question went haywire and didn't really work.
Wait, Gerry,
okay. Sorry, Gary didn't get to go.
Well,
yeah.
Andy, I think you were next.
Well, I've already spoken, but I was just going to say this, that Gerry, you make a totally valid point, and I'm not arguing with you at all. I understand that point. I will say this, and I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but if the people from Universal came to me and they said, Andy, we need somebody to oversee all the future Frank Zappa releases, would you take that job? I'd say, yes, you're damn right. I'd take that job.
Well,
I would take that job in a heartbeat.
I already said,
because I think I'd do as good a job as I could. I really would.
Well, look we hope Joe remains.
Simon, you take that job. Wouldn't you take that job?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I already said to Joe, why don't you let us have a meeting with Bruce at Universal? He says, that's a good idea. We're not going to tell you what to release, just to us, because we are veteran, you know, music consumers of Frank and studiers. I mean, we've all studied Frank for 50 years, and now Tyler's catching up on us. So anyways, I do forget it's Gary's turn. Or Gerry.
All I was going to say is there's one other aspect you guys aren't considering. Yeah, Frank approved the final versions. Sometimes he goes, you know, he's Frank Zappa and he makes choices that I absolutely hate. You have to remember,
yeah,
I saw Zappa like 10 times in the 70s, and I made a cassette of every single concert with the exception of the first one, which is the Phil Maurice, which ended up being on the album anyway. I was actually at the first Phil Maurice, the one, you know, the box set that just came out. I was on the first show where I heard Billy the Mountain for the first time. So I didn't have a cassette of that. But every single concert after that, including the ones with Flo and Eddie at Carnegie Hall, the Lincoln Center stuff, the Nassau Coliseum, he did all these things that I had cassettes of for like a year or two before they came out on an album. And I got to tell you, there's a few things I much prefer the earlier versions than what he sort of tweaked the hell out of on the albums and just lost the gist of what the original song to me was. I think the best example would be 50-50 with that wacko, you know, Ricky Lancelotti singing the vocals. When live at the Nassau Coliseum in 1973 is the most amazing blend of Sal Marquez was still in the group. So it had trumpets, it had Jean-Luc Ponty on violin, it had Ian Underwood on clarinet and saxophone. The harmony, that section harmonized, is unbelievable. And you only hear a snippet of it on the Overnight Sensation the last time they play it.
Yeah.
But the sound of that instrumental was amazing. Another example is I saw the full wazoo, the grand wazoo, the full 20 piece at the Felt Forum, I think, in September, one of the few shows he did with a full group. Billy the Mountain, to me, sounded much better live than it did on what eventually came out, you know, with all the narration and everything, because the processing or something, he either added all these weird synthesizers or did stuff to the brass that made the brass sound synthetic. And the real acoustic, natural sound of the stuff sounded way better. So there's a lot of stuff I heard on my cassettes after the concert that, you know, years later I heard what he put on the album and I didn't like it. So, I mean, that's
a key
to consider.
But that's a key to what I'm saying. That's the artist's choice. That's his vision. I'm not saying you can't go back and study these live tapes because they weren't released by someone selling those live tapes unless there was some bootlegs. That's another issue. But what you're doing is that's what made Frank the artist he was. When he went back, I have a quote somewhere. He says, I can go back and change my recordings, mixing them the way I want. And when he added that bass to Reuben and the Jets, we're all like, what the fuck is this? Arthur Barrow's bass on Reuben and the Jets. And so that's his choice.
I actually really like that. I like that version.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. All our aesthetic can change and shift. And that's the beauty of us having one central artist releasing his stuff how he wants to.
Mhm.
We can do research and do that, which we did, and it really came out well. Yeah, it wasn't a failure, but it, like the question was, it's not a miserable failure. But how about this one? Because Gerry touched on this. You see, Bob Dylan just commented in the Wall Street Urinal 2 days ago about Frank. How cool was that? And Tyler and I are about to release our Bob Dylan Frank Zappa movie. It's a short 3-minute thing that Khalil's playing the soundtrack. It's been rejected from film festivals worldwide, so you know it's got to be horrible. And Bob Dylan said poetry meant it was meant for the ears, not the eye. And you know, we know in Frank's Hot Rats, he says a movie for your ears. So that's sense ratio shifting, you know, and music's for your ears, supposedly, although Frank was a filmmaker from day one. So if you listen to the WCBN Ann Arbor, Michigan interview with Frank, I linked, he says, the guy goes, do you write poetry? He says, my songs are poetry. And so then you go back to Aaron's video and he tells the whole story of the Grand Wazoo being a poem. You know, he wrote a poem.
1960, I think.
Yeah. And so T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. Gerry talked about this without knowing this question, that we have these things inside our head. How do we get them out of it? How do we get these things inside our head, whether it's dialogue, visuals, whatever? It's outing your inner dialogue. And it's outing your inner consciousness, your interior landscape. So the question is, what language is your inner dialogue in? And what language was Frank's inner dialogue in? Start with you, Gerry.
Repeat that one more time. I want to make sure I don't give the wrong.
And what language is your inner dialogue in? Gerry, what language is your inner dialogue in? And again, that means it doesn't have to be English. It's more, I'm really after more metaphorically. What language is your inner dialogue in? in what language was Frank's inner dialogue in? So it's speculating on the second and the first, but go ahead.
You know, the only similarity, and I think it's a big similarity, it's chaos. You know,
Yeah.
my brain, like everyone else, is pure chaos and trying to make sense of it. And I think Zappa had the same, he had so much chaos in his head, but he knew how to organize it and make something beautiful out of it. But I think that would be the similar, other than that, I mean, people have been writing about that for thousands of years, how our brain is just, going crazy with chaotic thoughts and trying to make sense of life. And I think Zappa was the same way. His thoughts were he was able to take chaos and organize it in a really beautiful way. I think maybe is the best answer I could think of.
Beautiful. Again, you got it, what I'm after. Go ahead, Jez. What language is your inner dialogue in, and what language do you think Frank's was in?
I don't know. The only way to still the neurotic thoughts and the chaos for me is when I'm playing the piano, at my gig at the airport. And it's like when I'm doing that, there's no thought, there's no inner dialogue, or meditating, that works. But I think I think that Gerry, you really nailed that about the chaos. And so music and art is a way to calm that chaos. So it's a cross between chaotic and peacefulness and the search for peace. And I think, I couldn't speak for Frank, but I think when he wrote this amazing music, made these incredible records, that's a way of making tangible that inner dialogue and making it something that it gets out of your system, and then people might get something out of it. But I mean, he always said it was just for him, right? He did it to please himself. And I think we all do that. And that's the responsibility that we have as artists, really.
Yeah, he said a lot of contradictory things. He says, I'm just in the entertainment business, and, he would never say, I'm a poet. Like they asked Bob Dylan, are you a poet? And he goes, no, I'm a trapeze artist.
There's song and dance man, too.
A song and dance. That sounds like something Frank would say. Okay, Tyler, what language is your inner dialogue in, and what language is Frank's in?
Oh man, I wish I had a good answer. Gerry, could you suggest something for my inner dialogue? What do you think?
No, my favorite answer ever in my podcast is this great filmmaker said, I wish I knew.
There you go. Yeah, mine's just white noise all the time. I think
that's a great answer. White noise is a great answer, because if that's what you're getting out. Now, what do you think Frank's was? I mean, look at Tyler. We got to, again, praise you. We're all old fucks who've studied Frank for years, and then you show us what he specifically got from Edgar Varese. I mean, most of us just go, oh yeah, Edgar Varese is a big influence, but you pinpointed it. So, I mean, you got into Frank's head somehow. What do you think his inner dialogue was?
Well, just on that, it's a good thing that Brett couldn't make it, Brett Clement, because I just steal everything that he already said.
Well, we're gonna do it. Let me address that. We're gonna talk about that, because T.S. Eliot said the mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing point, because the way I met Jez was from the great drummer Don Rollins, who told me Joel Selvin, the critic from San Francisco, who's written 20 books on rock and roll, who I just interviewed the other day.
Yeah, it was a good one, Gerry.
Yeah, he said that Joel might have said this. They asked Frank, what is a genius? And Frank says, a genius is someone who plagiarizes and you can't tell where he stole it from. Now, if anybody ever finds that quote in any Zappa thing, let me know the source, because here's the problem with Zappa studies now, is that almost all the printed matter is online, but all the audio interviews have not been just transcribed and online. Get it together. Some kid can do this with their algorithm software and go boop, and it could be all in printed matter, Yeah. So anyways, great answer, Tyler.
Yeah.
Andy, you're up.
Well, without being silly about this, it is English. I only think in English. But I think what you're talking about, if I'm hearing your question correctly, is the thought process itself. And I've said this before, and I know Simon has heard me, speak in these terms, but it's an associative process. And I've actually done this. It's a little thought exercise that when I just let my mind go freely, I'll stop myself from time to time and then try to work backward from the images and thoughts that came into my head. And usually they're all related in some way, that it's an associative process, that it thinks about this, which leads to that thought, which leads to that thought. And it's not time-based, it's not chronological. Yeah. And so that to me is what conceptual continuity is. The pattern of your associative process is uniquely mine. So my conceptual continuity is that. And it also contains a whole lot of Frank Zappa. And I think when people are trying to figure out Frank Zappa's inner dialogue or conceptual continuity, which I kind of equate, when they're trying to figure out conceptual continuity, they're trying to figure out Frank's thought process and the memories that he has and the associations that are triggered by at any one point in time by any word or quotation or event from the past. So anyway, I don't mean to be a contrarian, but I don't consider it to be chaos or white noise, because I think if you examine your thoughts, that they actually follow a pattern that is unique to you, and it will make some sense with examination.
Yeah, you're like James Joyce. He took the word chaos and corpse and put it chaos. No, he put chaos in cosmos and corpse and put them together. It's sort of like this weird mixture of both, but I'm glad you're giving us the other side of the picture, because it's a huge thing that we're tackling, and that's why we're individuals. In fact, Andy McLuhan updated medium is the massage or medium is the message mid-career. Says, nope, it's no longer that. It's user. The user is the content. Well, so the user is the content. The user of the art is what's the art is. It's not what the artist intended.
Right. Okay. Yes. And I'll just follow this up by saying that I think everybody on my screen right now, we think similarly. And then if you go up to your refrigerator and you pull out some cream cheese, on some level, you're thinking about Frank Zappa. Or if you see there's a storm coming into Montana, you'll think, on some level, you'll leave Zappa in an insane number of ways.
No, that's a great commonality that we've found. I'm glad we're all here sharing it on Frank's birthday. And think about it, 70 years, his presence as a musician on our planet. It's pretty incredible. Okay, you're up, Simon, and then Khalil. You want me to repeat the question, or you know it?
In a dialogue, right? So Stephen Pinker, who wrote this book called The Language Instinct, used a word that I'd never heard before at the time when I read it, which is mentalese, by which he meant it's essentially about perception and cognition, if you like. You're thinking in images that may be audio as well as visual or tactile or anything, but essentially your inner dialogue ultimately is about sensory information coming in and how you process that. And we talked about pattern recognition. That's obviously a very important thing about Frank, and that's the particular way in which he was able to spot patterns or destabilize previously sort of unquestioned categories and so forth. That I think is his inner dialogue was sort of about. I mean, he was so adept at taking a mistake that happened, or something that just serendipitously happened, and turn it into something else that then just gave an extra tweak to what he was saying that had that Calder effect or whatever. It's about so his inner process is about escaping categorization as much as anything, I think. I mean, Andy was saying about, the chain of association, and obviously it is that, and that's what makes us individuals, is the particular way we do that. But so it's not, I mean, it comes out in the form of words. I mean, we're using English now. I mean, if I were to switch into Japanese, some of you would follow, but maybe most of you wouldn't, but it would still be the same information, just filtered through a different interface. But the thing that is doing the understanding of the perception is before language and maybe after language as well. It's about sense and sensibility. There you are, Jane Austen.
Really good, Simon, because it's what T.S. Eliot said is, when I talk to you, I got to use words. And no, you don't. We could do a whole 2-hour Zoom on Frank with gesture in holding things up to the camera, like this. And,
Yeah.
printed word. So we think we got to use words. It's the most addicting and universal drug, words. But
as he once said to me, it's pretty hard to hum the news.
That's good.
I asked him about that once, and he said, "Yeah, that was hard to
Okay,
hum the
Khalil, you're up. What's your inner dialogue in? What language is your inner dialogue in, and what language do you think Frank's was in?
Well, I've always thought of Frank's music as athletic in a sort. It's very angular. There's nothing smooth, rounded about it. It's very angular. And so I kind of think Frank had an athletic side, even though he says, I don't like sports, never much cared for sports, centrifugal force. But I always think of his music as athletic. So I kind of think of his inner dialogue as maybe, pushing these boundaries physically to play the instruments to make his music. So I don't know, I kind of think of it as athletic inner dialogue, and that's kind of a metaphor, and that kind of suits what I personally think about also, inner dialogue. But let me just say something. Gerry Fialka, there is no one in the world like you who is willing to do this kind of stuff, this kind of work, and bring these people together. And you are the new Marshall McLuhan. Like, you're better than McLuhan. And maybe it's because you have tools that he doesn't have with the internet and everything, but you blow me away with your conceptual continuity is so exciting and so interesting.
Bravo, Gerry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's so neat that these people, we all come together, and it's because I told Ginger, I'm in this car, I got to get my car, but I don't want to disappoint Gerry. So I got to make sure I got to have my phone, and, I don't want Gerry to be, upset, but,
well, I appreciate it, Khalil.
And you were talking about words, and then I just had something for Gerry with, what's the song about words from,
Missing
Missing
Right, what are words for? Yeah.
What are words for?
No one listens anymore.
That was so. I thought of you right when we were talking about words at the end.
That's funny.
What are words for?
I've been playing that tune. Believe it or not, I do a solo piano version of Words on my airport all the time, and it kills. And everyone notices it always.
That is
It's a great song. It's a beautiful composition.
I wasn't planning on that, but I'll tell Terry that, so he'll appreciate that.
Well, it's cool.
Terry knows me, by the way. You can use my name.
Oh, good. I will.
Cool. Two of my buddies play drums in Missing Persons right now. I got two. Yeah, Andy Sinisi and Nate Morton both play drums for Missing Persons right now.
Very
Pretty
cool.
wild.
Okay, let's move on. We got a few more minutes.
Simon's raising his hand.
Oh, Simon, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something very quickly about something that Jez said about the two poles of chaos and peace. I think you said, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking of it sort of perhaps maybe more in terms of the interface between chaos and order, and that the whole language endeavor in a sense is like throwing a net of order over sort of sense, so that we can actually discuss the things that we've identified and tag them with noises, and that's how we do this whole game. But it's the process of creating boxes. I mean, we go back to crush all boxes, that classic sort of Zappaism, that found thing. Yeah. It's like all words are about creating categories and boxes, and the same with music. It's scales and notes and everything is sort of artificial categories that we use to play with. But it's a question of how far can you stray out of order before it becomes too much chaos, and it's that line between order and chaos that is kind of the most interesting point of so much art, because it's the sort of the gnarly bit where you're trying to form new categories without straying too much into chaos. And Frank is just the past master at that, I think. He never allows you to stray into too much order, but he always saves you from too much chaos at the end of the day. There's a sort of a brilliant sort of path that he surfs through those two possibilities.
Really well put, Simon. The gap is where the action is, the in-betweenness.
Absolutely.
And so, Frank said this great line. He says, I have a lot of different musical questions, and I'm looking for a lot of different musical answers. We'll start with you, Andy. Name one unresolved question you have about Frank, but it could even be more like, if you could ask Frank a question right now, what would it be? So it's an unresolved question that you could actually ask Frank. What would you ask him right now? Good, you're cracking up. That's what it's about. Simon's looking all serious.
I'm absolutely drawing a blank. I think I once answered that question rather flippantly by saying, was it worth it?
That's a good question. Was it worth it?
And I think that he would think that's an insulting question.
Oh, look, I wouldn't worry about feeling insulted, whatever you say to Frank, because we've watched, so much of his interviews. You see him. Yeah. I mean, there's a brand new one that just popped up 2 days ago. That's unbelievable if you haven't seen it. And Reeling in Years. I mean, it's unbelievable how that. So we know his approach to being asked questions, but this is like, that aside, he did participate in a lot of interviews, and he said, this was part of my performance. This was part of my, he wasn't an asshole. He was someone who was articulate, and he was a satirist, and he wasn't attacking people as somebody uses that word. He says, I don't attack people on the Dick Cavett show. This is the job of the satirist.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Gerry.
No, go ahead.
I think, in all honesty, I would ask him, how do you feel about guys like me? who love your music so much. How do you feel about me?
You know what he does? He usually hires you, because he did it to me. I said backstage at a show, I want to work for you, and he said, you may just have a job. Now, he didn't know much about me. He knew a little of what I was doing.
Gerry, that's fucking crazy that happened.
Yeah, and then
crazy.
I mean, then Gerry, I know fans that got hired by Frank. They show some sort of interest in what he's doing.
Wasn't that Warren?
The guy who shot the photos for Roxy, who passed away, sadly, he just said, hey, I'm a photographer, because he wanted to work for Frank. He wasn't a photographer. And his picture eventually got on the cover of Roxy. He faked it to make it. The most seen TED Talk ever. Okay, let's go ahead, Jez. You were going to add something?
I said, wasn't that Warren Cucurula in a way? The fan who...
Warren, great example. Okay, yeah. Tyler, you're up. You get to ask Frank a question.
I would say, hey, can I get an audition?
That is great. All right. See, you're being real. Okay, Jez.
I had the honor of spending a few days in his orbit, maybe 5 days. I asked him all the questions I wanted to ask him. I was up at his house, and, they say don't meet your heroes, right? But it doesn't work with him. He was my hero. I met him, and he's like one of the kindest people I ever met. Without a doubt, the nicest, most down-to-earth person I ever met in the music business. So I don't have any questions.
That's beautiful. See, we don't, just because a question is asked doesn't mean you have to answer it. But I do know the great Jez line that you told me was, Scott said, oh, he's taking you out to dinner. That means you're in the band.
Yeah. And
then Bobby Martin showed back up and says, sorry.
Who knows? I don't know why, there could be any number of reasons. That's one of the things that I heard. But the dinner at an Armenian restaurant with a polka duo of a drummer and accordion player. And he said, when we get back, there's going to be a test. and they got me accordion sounds. We played 2 hours of polkas of his songs. And that's just such a thrill. I mean, it was so much fun. And he had so much fun. He loved music and he loved musicians.
I ate dinner with him at an Asian restaurant. Is that the proper word you can use these days? Japanese, Chinese, I don't know. In the sort of Ravi Shankar music was going on in the background. And he goes, they just changed keys. Like in the middle, he just listening to the background music at a restaurant. Wow. Okay, Simon, you got to ask him a lot of questions, but what would you ask him now?
I'm kind of like in the jazz camp. I was in the fortunate position of being able to ask him a lot of things. However, in my entanglements with young Tyler over the years, I've realized that there was so much shit I should have asked him that it never even occurred to me to ask, which is, just very frustrating. I don't know. I would just also second what Jez said about him being so kind. I mean, the very kind person was my impression of him, and also kind of feeding into the whole thing about just taking on fans who came into his orbit, and he would employ. He just seemed to believe in serendipity a great deal. Whatever came into his orbit, unless you were obviously an asshole, then it was sort of somehow, oh, maybe this person is supposed to be in my life. And I mean, my own experience, I mean, who was I? It just came out of nowhere. And it was like, the next thing I know, he's asking me to do stuff for him. It's like, really? Why me? But he just sort of seemed to go with that in the same way as any extraneous material. It's like, anything, anywhere, anytime, for no reason at all. It's just, this has happened, and let's just see what happens. Let's just go with it. And unless it went wrong, then it went right. You could roll with it. So I don't know what I would ask him. Why is time of an affliction? And is that even an English sentence?
That is a great one. And you did answer it in your rant right then, Simon. You said, why me? That's a good, yeah. So Gerry, you can't answer like these two guys. You can't say.
I was just going to say I have the same answer as Jez and Simon, because I've asked what I really wanted to. Since
your time with Frank, what's a question that's come up that's unresolved for you?
It would have to be just compositional. I think the thing that still blows me away is his harmonic choices, because he just comes up with chord progressions and juxtapositions of chords over melodies that shouldn't really work together that work. I might pick his brain on that kind of thing, but in terms of the things that are really important to me, I asked him, and so I feel I got that out of my system. But if I had any questions, they'd be more analytical, from a composer's point of view, just how we did certain things.
Khalil.
I would say, Frank, what's the ugliest part of your body?
He ripped that off from Don Preston's girlfriend, by the way.
Oh, that's cool. Or no, I'd say, let me take you to the beach, right? That's not really a question. That's more of a statement. But
the answer would be no. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I would, earlier I said Frank is an affliction, a monkey on my back, because I'm in between you guys and Tyler. I was too young when you guys were hanging out with him and playing with him. I was like 10. I was too young. I was not able to, I couldn't drive. There was no way to go see a show or whatever. And I missed that. And then by the time I got old enough to start getting good at my crafts, he dies. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll never meet him. And so it's just hearing that you guys were near him and talking to him, it blows me away. It get like, I'm sure Tyler has some of that too. It's frustrating that I never got near him. I never got even never a sniff. I was just not old enough. And seeing you guys talking, knowing that you guys talked with him and met with him and worked with him and did that, it just makes me endlessly happy that it gives it like this legitimacy that Frank was actually real. It was like, because there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, maybe it's all just a dream, maybe it doesn't, but you guys have the tangible evidence and proof. And frequently over the, I've known Gerry for 37 years. I've known Gerry. And frequently over those years, I'd say, tell me something about Frank I don't know, or just tell me. And then Gerry will tell me something. He'll just he'll be like, oh, see that building over there? That's where we did a rehearsal once. I was like, wow, look at that. I'll never look at that building the same way again. Wow, look at that building. So, I just love hearing what you guys would ask him more than what I would ask him, because I don't know, I just feel like I was just so not available and it wasn't real for me. Tyler.
You wouldn't be like the kid, who was it, Andy Sinisi or somebody who played the black page on the bumper of the limo Frank was in, or, not on the bumper, on the side of the car. He says, Frank, wait, I can play the black page. So on the car, he played the black page so Frank could see him. Do you going to ask something, Tyler?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely echo that. Like, you all are incredible, beautiful people for sharing all your experiences, and like, thank you for letting me annoy you. I do the same thing with Gerry. Like, we would be on the phone and I would ask about Frank, or Simon, who I email, being like, please tell me what this lyric means. I know, like, all of that. Or Jez, who I email and annoy him, being like, please send me sheet music that he gave to you. Like, all you guys are that you seriously, well,
inspiring. You guys are inspiring because you're carrying it forward. And we had the time-space continuum of luck and knowing certain people. And, if it wasn't for Ed Mann, I never would have met him. And I'm eternally grateful to him for that. As same thing for the missing persons audition. So we were very lucky to be in a certain time in history. And you guys are lucky and we're lucky to have you guys carrying it forward, because that's what it takes. That's really important stuff. Really
Tyler is the world's leader on the new wave of young Zappa fans and Zappa aficionados and Zappa scholars. Tyler is the world's leader. Yeah. And that's really cool for us to be honest with Tyler.
We're fans.
I agree. It is really cool that you guys get to talk to me. That is really cool for you guys.
That. The more you practice, the luckier you get. Okay, let's go into this quote from Frank, 2002. My solos are speech influenced rhythmically and harmonically. They're either pentatonic or polyscale oriented. And there's the mixolydian mode that I also use a lot, but I'm more interested in melodic things. I think the biggest challenge when you go to play a solo is to invent a melody on the spot. Copeland says the 4 elements of music are harmony, melody, rhythm, and tone color. Talk about Frank integrating the 4, and I'll start with Tyler. He already's answered this. Not so much how he integrated, but which of those do you like best in Frank? Jump off anywhere you want to go in those 4 elements that Copeland distinguish: harmony, rhythm, melody, and tone color. Go ahead, Tyler.
Wow, yeah, that's difficult. Well, I think first off, everyone who, even if you're like a casual fan of Frank, you probably know the rhythm stuff. But I think that's not the most important thing, or at least the most interesting thing. I don't think he gets enough credit for his melodies, honestly. I think his melodic sensibility is really, really incredible. Just in the fact that he can do it all over the scope. He, like, something that like Let's Make the Water Turn Black that's like one of the best melodies I've ever heard in my life. But so is the Bebop Tango, and they couldn't be farther apart. And they don't really share that much in common. So it's really, really, really incredible that he could do both of those things. And they're both really, really beautiful to me. So I think he doesn't get enough credit for the melody stuff. If I had to pick one that's interesting, I think I would pick that.
Thanks. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I think all those things come together rather neatly in his guitar soloing. I will second what Tyler just said. I whistle a lot. I like to whistle. I whistle all the time. And I whistle Frank all the time because his melodic sense is my favorite. Let's put it that way. So I'm totally with you there. The speech, rhythmically speech influenced nature of his guitar solos, that comes, I'm convinced, just from blues phraseology, how black singers started to sing in such a way of using speech patterns as opposed to one note per syllable, predictable rhythms. So that comes through in everything that he does rather neatly. And then tone color, I think is most, or timbre is best exemplified by his guitar tones. And I think how the tone in that moment influenced what he chooses to play. How is my guitar sounding? How is it how's my amplifier, responding, and how is it feeding back, and blah 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 blah. All of those things then influence the overall solo product.
Yeah, I love I Come From Nowhere, just the rawness of that solo when it comes in, but that phase shifting he used for a few years was so irritating. Okay, thank you, Andy. Gerry, you're up.
I honestly, I agree with everyone that the melodies are amazing and you hum them and play them all the time. I think what he blows me away is the combination of all four of those elements. So you listen to Grand Wazoo, Waka Jawaka, and just the layering and the coloring of, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Parts of the beginning of Big Swifty, it just might be a one-shot deal. Just the weird layering of the guitars with the brass, with the singing, with the rhythm. I mean, there's so much even in just the first minute of Big Swifty, where the rhythm is amazing, the melody is amazing, the color's amazing, the harmony. I think what does it for me is how he somehow puts it in a blender and comes up with a combination of things that no one has done before. But like I started the conversation with when we began, it feels like something you heard in a dream, where dreams make sense in the dream, but when you step out of it, you think, oh, God, that made no sense. And he makes sense of just all this elements and different. He just combining it together is just, he does it better than anyone I've heard for what he does for that particular kind of sound.
He's better than Cat Stevens. Okay, Joe.
I just want to echo
the line from Baby Snakes by Joey Psychotic.
I just want to echo the melody vibe. I mean, I think as time goes on in 100 years, people will be talking about his melodies and how beautiful his music was, because, that doesn't get discussed as much by non-musicians, I guess, but the beauty of the melodies and like Gerry, you were talking about Waka Jawaka. I mean, those melodies, just they cut right to you. And now the other thing, I used to study a lot of Indian music, and I incorporate that into my piano playing. And I play with some local Indian musicians here in Atlanta. There's this guitar player named Jayanta. And when I hear him, he reminds me of Frank. And I mentioned it to him. He's like, oh, I grew up on Frank. So it's like he's playing blues. He plays a Les Paul, this guy. And he's playing blues mixed with Indian music. It's like, wait a minute, where have I heard that before? It's like, to me, I always go to the Indian music thing in Frank's playing. And it all has to do with what drummers, right? Which drummers playing behind him, which drummer is inspiring him at that particular moment, catching the rhythmic thing, but not too much, or maybe too much, depending on the situation. It's totally original and unique. There's no one like him. There's no one that plays guitar like him. And I think melody and being in the moment, being in the flow, rhythmic stuff is very important. All of these are what made him such an original.
Super. Simon and then Khalil. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, just on the spoken rhythm thing, I think that's a hugely important part of his music, and something that we often don't notice when we're speaking, just how rhythmic our utterances, to use the technical term, are. I mean, they're very articulated and very kind of like sophisticated recursive units, if you like. When you're saying, well, this thing reminds me of that, which was this and that. And so your sentences can endlessly flow into different subclauses, and that's something that he does with his guitar work in particular. I always used to remember in the very early days listening to it, thinking, this is like having a conversation with a really intelligent person, because it's just endless sort of exploration of little pathways, just where you think, yeah, well, I've said this, and oh, by the way, there's this, and then that's that, and then, I'm thinking of Hot Rats in particular at the beginning, which was my sort of like first real exposure to his guitar inventiveness. So the rhythms of speech, I think, are hugely important in understanding where he was drawing from somehow, which is not something that comes out of a regular kind of 4x4 approach to music. Are you going to have 4x4 or 3/8 or 5/8 or 7/8? No, we're not even talking about that stuff. This is like Tuplet City. Language is Tuplet City, and so is his guitar work. So as to the four elements, then I'm with Gary completely. I think it's an absolute blend of them. It's the very blendedness of it that is what's unique about it. And again, bringing that same sensibility to each of those dimensions and demanding the same excellence, whether it's the sound quality that comes out of his guitar amplifier, or whether it's the sort of the harmonic balance or whatever. He's applying that same attention to detail. And finally, and I had another point and I've just forgotten what I was going to say, but it'll come back to me. So
it'll come back, because here's Khalil, drummer and percussionist. You're going to say rhythm, right, Khalil?
Well, I also play piano, and I know the harmonic structure of his work is intense. But like Ruth Underwood said, she felt like Frank's melodies were made for her. And I felt the same way when, I play that same instrument that Ruth plays, and I just was like, these are made for me. This kind of weird, I appreciate that kind of stuff, that kind of music more than improvising in jazz. I prefer the orchestral approach of those melodies. Like Tyler and Andy have talked about the melodies, and Gary mentioned Big Swifty. And I think what sets Big Swifty apart, when you first put it on, I think it's like there's a cowbell in there. The cowbell sets the tone to me more than any other element in there. Is that stupid yeah,
is that, sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's that signature sabotage moment. It's like it's the thing where it should be something else, and God damn it, it's a fucking cowbell. That shouldn't work. It does. It's every single time he takes you down the garden path to expect something, and it isn't that. And what I was going to say now, just sorry, very briefly, but last night I had a session with a friend of mine who's an audio sort of hi-fi enthusiast, and we both have reasonably decent systems, and we like to go once a month or so and just sit 4 hours in front of him and play music. And in honor of the last day of Zappa Band, I decided that I was going to play, because he's not a Zappa fan particularly, although it's growing on him. I thought, I'm going to play, because normally we'll play maybe 15 tracks each from various different genres, everything that we can think of. I thought, I'm going to play him just Frank, and I'm not going to tell him. So I started playing stuff, and he'd go, "Wow, that's really cool. What's that?" And so, "Oh, that's Frank from this." "Really? That's Zappa?" And then the next time I play something else, and he'd go, "That's really interesting. Is that Penderecki, or is that?" I said, "No, that's Frank Zappa." He says, "What? What the fuck?" And I went through the whole evening, a whole 2 hours worth of stuff, and he was just couldn't believe it. But the thing is, there is that. What is consistent is that sabotage. I always love that quote. What about him not having written? Why do you always sabotage yourself? And he said, the sabotage is the message. And I think that's the thread. If take it back to the purple thread, it's that sort of just at the last minute pulls a rug out from under your last expectation, and oh, I am myself. I have permission to be myself.
There you go.
Beautiful. And that's Khalil. Hold on, Andy. Khalil sat down at Brad Kay's, great pianist, works with Susie, and he started playing a Zappa piece. And Brad goes, "Is that Stravinsky?" And it was like the highest compliment for him to recognize that. Okay,
Well, you
go
know,
ahead.
I was playing the chords from the Black Page in in the New Age version, you know, the New Age Black Page version. I was playing those chords, kind of arpeggiated up and down the piano and kind of making it a little my own, but that's what it was. I was playing Zappa, and Frank and Brad thought it was Stravinsky.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was just going to say that this fits into everything we've been talking about, but the melodies and the harmonies and how they work together, stellar. But what I find myself listening to a lot and really appreciating, and Tyler could make a video about this, but whenever there's a melody present, what you consider the primary melody, there's another line or two that's harmonizing with it underneath it. You know what I'm talking about? Like in Wild Love, dun, 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 dun. There's another instrument under there always playing another line that's following it parallel, not exactly parallel, but following the contour of the melody. And it's a weird, how he harmonizes melodic lines in that fashion, I find really, really, really unique and sometimes confusing and always surprising.
Hey, well, that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah. I
But
see what
that's
you
the way
did.
it goes
I see what you did there,
sometimes.
Khalil.
You just might find yourself in the clutches of some.
But those textures and those harmonic subordinate melodies is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, you gotta sing him a twinge out of key, Khalil, or the algorithm god on YouTube will yank us. Or tag Tyler when he's changing a diaper. So, you know, on Burt Weenie's Sandwich, when the attendant, the security guard, is on stage to eject someone, there's a guy in the audience who yells, "Get that uniform off the stage, Frank." And Frank says, "Everybody in this room is wearing a uniform, and don't kid yourself." So it's a fun little line that sort of sticks out if you listen closely to the little things that happen between the music. In fact, one of my favorite moments in between music is on 200 Motel's soundtrack, where the music goes all haywire and Jimmy Carl Black goes, "What the fuck was that?
Yeah.
You call that music?" And to sell someone, that's a product that Universal, you know, they're not going to sell that. That's Frank making his product who he is.
You know, Gerry.
Yeah.
The fact that Frank was at both times the smartest guy in the room, and it had nothing to do with music. But he was able to see things that most people, like you just said, everyone has a uniform and don't fool yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
And then to be also simultaneously, you know, the greatest musical force of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he said some amazing things. Go ahead, Simon.
That's because the clincher to that is when the guy then continues shouting and he says, "You'll hurt your throat. Stop it," which is the kind side of him too. It's like, you know, it's just to kind of letting the guy off the hook kind of thing. And then,
thank God it wasn't Ben Watson. So, you know, this is about, we all are here to make the world a better place. We know that. We're all good, responsible human beings. I gathered you all together here. I know you all come from good families. I don't know what went wrong, but
I do.
but Nina Menkins just made a film called Brainwashed about how males frame females, the female and male gaze in Hollywood. And she says, "May all beings achieve liberation." And I think this is what Frank was talking about with his art to us, was freedom, liberation, and, you know, absolutely free. And how do we make the world a better place? You know, he said, infiltrate. The only way you're going to make change is to work within the system. So Khalil, how do we make the world a better place?
Well,
Heavy
let's go back. During the pandemic, I was hearing the song, well, I got me a rap that I'm gonna be floating. Oh, Mississippi, keep going. What's that song? Oh, Blackwater, keep on rolling.
Doobie.
Doobie.
Doobie Brothers, the violinist, played with Frank.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
Novi.
Amazing.
Go ahead.
Novi.
So I heard that song and I started crying because I've always liked that song. It's a fine song, but it represents something. I was 5 years old when that song came out, and I just said, I want to be 5 again. I'd like to be 5 again. Wouldn't it be nice to be 5 again and not have to, this world that we're in right now it's the best of times and the worst of times, but I don't know how to make the world a better place. Jeez. I guess I would try to I'm drawing a blank on how to make the world a better place. I don't know.
No worries. Simon.
Go ahead.
My wife has a Frank quote on the wall of her studio, which I also like very much, and it says, it's the one about, the question is, what are you going to do with your spare time until you're a cinder? And I always thought that was a great way of putting it, because that is the dilemma, ladies and gentlemen, that faces us. What are we going to do with our spare time until we're a cinder? And the question, he answers it by saying, the thing is, you do art, because making things beautiful is what is the, what is it, the exact word? Because making things beautiful is the best thing you can do, or something like that. I'll have to add this as an addendum, but it's kind of, what can you do? I mean, you can give it a try. The politics eventually will, the arc of justice bends towards whatever the fuck, I mean, maybe things get better, but they don't get better just like that. And I think we have enough proof in our own lifetimes, maybe not Tyler quite yet, that, the efforts that can be made don't necessarily bear fruit very quickly. So just, I don't know, take what you can from Frank and use it to infuse it in your entire life and try to just keep people questioning stuff. What was that thing he said about, I urge every young child living at home with their family to say, I doubt it, to everything that their parents say. Something like that. Yeah,
that's good. That was beautiful, Simon. Put that comment, when you figure that quote out, put it in the comment section. So then this video will look like it's important, because it will have at least one comment. Okay, Gerry, you're up.
Gerry, this would be a conversation for definitely another video, because I have a much more, I hate using the word spiritual, it sounds very hokey, but I guess my feeling is, I think things are organized, life is organized, human evolution is organized, that there needs to be stupidity and there needs to be greatness, and there's always going to be the battle between stupid people and great people, and we could do all we want, but I think it's built into the formula that people just evolving in the beginning are just going to be plain stupid. So we could try to do the best. The suggestions that Simon made was great. Beauty and art, obviously, but not everyone is born with either the talent to create art or the ability to appreciate art. And some things it's a slow process, and I think that's the nature of existence, is we're meant to have, just the way you mentioned Zappa, like in contradictions and contrast, I think that's the nature of humanity. I think it's meant to have really crappy stuff with really good stuff. So I think this is the way it's meant to be.
That's good, Gerry, because the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. So Jez, you're up, and then Andy, and then Tyler. Go ahead.
I found the quote, so I can give you chapter and verse. So the question is, what do you do with your spare time until you're a cinder? And the answer is, you do whatever you can that makes your particular life more beautiful, and you get involved in art, because that's what makes things beautiful. And that's the least we can do, really, is kind of do what we can to make our own lives beautiful, and then maybe that will sort of spread out and people will join in, maybe, rather than getting up and trying to force your point of view on other people. If you create as beautiful a life as you can, then maybe that will help
I,
us.
I retroactively make that my answer.
Yeah, Simon, that's how Frank taught me to embrace contradiction, for a guy who talked about ugliness and how important recognizing the ugly, both ends of the spectrum. Okay, Jez, then Andy, then Tyler. Go ahead.
Growing up as a musician, I just always thought about myself, basically, and music. Something I learned from my wife, Mindy, of 39 years. If you can do some act of kindness each day for someone in any way, that's a really helpful thing. And then I'm very fortunate. I don't consider myself in the music business anymore. I'm in the music therapy business. So the job that I keep referring to, playing at the busiest airport in the world, Atlanta, every day I get to see how music affects people in real time, over and over again. And Zappa's music is part of that, because, I think I can read people really well, like who's going to be a Zappa fan and who's going to relate if they hear Peaches or something. But just the other day, there was a nice couple with cowboy hats and big belt buckles. I wouldn't have pegged them as Zappa fans. And I went into Peaches, as a matter of fact. The guy looks at his wife, Frank Zappa, and they come over and they're all excited, So makes me really happy, but music in general makes people happy. And we're fortunate enough to be able to play music and think about the healing quality of it and how it can affect people. That will make the world a better place. That's how I feel.
Healing power. Go ahead, Andy.
I would say whatever we need to do, whatever it takes to make people stop being impressed by wealth. The ostentatious shows of wealth are not anything to be proud of. That the decadence that oftentimes accompanies opulence, if we could eliminate that mindset, I think that'd be probably the biggest step we could take toward making things better.
Yeah.
That's a very practical answer, wasn't it?
No, that's a beautiful answer, but it's funny because, Frank was a self-made millionaire, and,
he wasn't ostentatious about it.
But he didn't do like one of his peers. His accountant went to Neil Young and says, dude, you got to spend some of your money. So he buys antique trains and antique cars. It's like, go feed the fucking homeless, you asshole.
Well, when Frank had extra money, he fed orchestral musicians with it. He was always blowing his money on orchestras.
Hey, check this out. No one knows this. I've never seen it in any Zappa history. Frank funded and housed a Black Panthers fundraiser. All the power to him. Okay, Tyler, how can we make the world a better place?
Well, everyone in the world has to do one thing, and that's to have a conversation with you, Gerry. That'll fix everything.
Well, I appreciate you guys playing. Let's close this out with and anybody can have any final comments they want, because we should do this more often, a couple times a year, and go into deeper subjects. I appreciate Tyler hitting the right buttons and all you being here. Frank has an amazing series of questions that you can hear me constantly re-asking, and some of them come up today. And I think one of his best questions he asked, rather than giving you answers, was inventing new questions and new metaphors, was, ever take a moment to show a real emotion? What the heck is a real emotion? Tyler, we'll start with you.
Oh, man. Well, that song is so not on brand for Frank. That's hilarious that you bring that up. So I don't know. Does he even know what a real emotion is? That's what I
Mhm.
want to know.
That's you're answering a question with a question.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want. I'm the host.
you-
I can end this
you
meeting if you don't
win.
like it.
No,
That's
Tyler, you win. That's what the Irish do. They answer questions with questions. All the power to you. Okay, Jez, what's a real emotion?
Well, of course, it's in between the moisture cream and velvet facial lotion. Is that the line? That's what a real emotion is. In
Simon,
between, like you keep
it's
saying.
in between
between.
this. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yes, yes, it's the in between, but in the sense that, you know, I mean, a real emotion is opposed to plastic people. It's the sort of, again, we're back to the categories. It's like a real emotion is what you genuinely yourself feel and don't feel the need to mitigate or transform because of the way that people might perceive it or whatever. It's just be yourself, and there is no other command. I think, you know, they used to say back in the day, know thyself. That was the thing, but actually be thyself is the more difficult and the more important thing, I think.
Yeah. Gary.
You know, I'm with Tyler, which is that quote is so out of sync for Zappa. Because Zappa is known for, you know, I mean, Moon talks about it all the time. He never raised his voice. He never got angry. I think, to me, that it was a beautiful line, and it always surprised me that it was in a Zappa song.
Yeah. And it's actually the clip you sent me from contributing to the Zappa documentary. They have that clip of him rehearsing that song.
Yeah.
That clip reveals so much.
I thought that was the best clip.
And I'll explain it to you for a second. He's singing the sausage song, I think, and he flubs and he laughs, and the engineer doesn't get it. And he says,
it was on Slobberer. He says it's the song with Slobberer in it.
Yeah. And he says, oh, these Hollywood engineers, I laugh once a year and you don't get it on tape. I guess God didn't want me to have that on tape.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows you, you know, I in researching this was the funnest thing. I've got tons of notes all around here.
So what was that? What was that on? Can we do? What was that? I missed that. What was the? Where did that happen? That incident that you just talked about.
He was recording for Joe's Garage, and it was the song where he talks about the slobber running down the side of his mouth.
It's Keep It Greasy. I'll send you the link.
And he starts laughing, I think, right after it goes slobber, and the engineer stops the recording. And, you know, Frank, what did you stop that for? He goes, I laugh once a year. Well, I wanted that on tape. I laugh once a year, and you don't get.
And Tyler, you have, it's not on YouTube. It's a private little clip you can send.
I'll send you the link.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. We shouldn't say these things too loud, but that's beautiful because there's another thing. Frank says he does know there's God, but he likes God, but he doesn't like religion. Have you ever seen that quote? That's wild because, you know, that's you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated in the religion in which you say you disbelieve. I mean, Joyce, Buñuel, and Frank, they're all what they are because they were raised Roman Catholic and their whole life is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I mean, that's all, you know, I was an altar boy. I learned Latin. Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo. That's a Latin thing you learn as an altar boy. You can eat my sleazy pancakes just for Saintly Alfonso. I goes, that dude's singing what I said as an altar boy. Okay, Andy, you know the question?
I think so. You were talking about ever take a minute just to show a real emotion.
Yeah, what's a real emotion?
You know, I will disagree with some of the other guys. I think that line makes perfect sense. I don't find it out of keeping with Frank at all because he's talking to those parents who are phonies. They don't show their children true affection. That their actions are perverted by their attempts at being beautiful and they're being inebriated. So I think it's what I would agree with Simon. It's just emotions that are unfiltered or unperverted. And it's just honesty.
But Andy, thank you for studying and teaching Frank for so many years because, you know, I'm a music person. I don't listen to lyrics. I guess I have. I
Right.
never knew your mouth was all about a shotgun and whomping on this. I never knew. All I thought was your mouth is your religion. He's talking about each one of us. What we say is our religion. And the rest of the lyrics, I never really followed them in all these years and knew the music inside and out. But for people to put in, that's how we listen to music.
It's funny. I
people
thought it was
listen-
about I thought it was about a blowjob.
but I mean, it's people put it in different contexts. But when you're an academic, you break these down and go, this song looks like it's supposed to be about this in the context of the whole lyrical composition. So I appreciate you telling me that.
Well, it's just like blues lyrics. Oftentimes they can be interpreted on about 2 or 3 different levels. And I think the blues in Frank comes through in that way, that his lyrics meaning 2 or 3 things simultaneously.
Yes, I agree.
And I should stress to the people who don't know me, I tend to teach people who really don't know anything about Frank. I turn them into Frank Zappa fans. This notion of, releasing the music and this and that, I think oftentimes people are trying to please the hardcores. I think we need to be cultivating beginners.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. And every Zappa fan you create, they in turn will create 10 more.
But that's the Tyler issue with me. When Dweezil first came out 15 years ago, started touring, I mean, me and Khalil were going every year, and he'd go, it's so good to see young people here. And it's like,
yeah,
there were young people there. They were dragged by their parents and said, dude, this is like Weird Al. My brother said, this is like Weird Al. And his kids went, this sucks. So Tyler was like, okay, I'll go. And he went, dong. So it did hit some of the youngers, but most of it, I mean, you go to the Baked Potato like me and Khalil do and see the Zappa Band. It's all gray-haired fucking industry ponytail guys.
I have to interject that I think it worked, what Dweezil did and what Project Object, Andre.
No, I mean, it does.
No, I get a lot of young people that recognize Zappa all the time at the airport. Young. Tyler, your age.
Yeah, and it is
all
good.
The time,
I'm not
all
saying
the time.
it doesn't. He disproved my theory, but it is when we go stuffed into this jazz club in LA and watch
it's the ponytail people, huh?
50 or 80 people, and they're singing every lyric perfect. It is a joyous clarion call, but it's like, ugh, adult rock.
Your hair's getting in the back.
Khalil, you're up.
Well, it beats realtor rock, which is it's just like what I call my kids and I are working on George Benson's Breezin' song from the 70s, instrumental song. My kids and I are playing it on violin and guitar, and I play piano on it. And I said to the kids, I go, this is what I describe as realtor rock, because it's like, this is what a realtor might play in their car as they're driving a client around looking at houses or something.
Realtor.
The ice cream changes. Those are the ones he wanted George to play.
It's also called yacht rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, yacht rock. Yeah, yacht rock is slightly different because I don't think George Benson falls in the yacht rock. Maybe he does. I mean, that's a great topic for another Zoom.
Yeah.
But
real emotion. What's a real emotion, Cleo?
Well,
I just think you said you cried to Black Water. That touched me deeply.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. When I was hearing all the answers, I started singing "Beauty Knows No Pain." Yeah. And I don't know. That's I kind of that's my answer. Beauty knows no pain.
Beautiful.
I think it's cool that Jazz gets to play in the airport every day.
What all kinds of music. I sprinkle the Zappa stuff in there, but I do all the stuff I love. A lot of jazz and a lot of odd Rundgren, all kinds of things. And it's just curious to me. It's not curious anymore because it happens every time you play a Frank song. They respond every time.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones is one of the simplest ones, Joe's Garage.
Yeah.
And the ponytail people like that one, Joe's Garage.
Oh,
they come over during that one. Yeah.
It wasn't very long.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Just simple, nice little song.
So anyways, it's really been a pleasure. We've gone over 2 hours. And again, I welcome any closing comments, and sorry I edited out anybody wanting to talk about other lyrics or quotations by Frank. We can plan for future salons. It's funny that this happened on the solstice too, because it's where the despair or the dark gets to go enlighten. That's what the solstice about. It's funny that Frank's proposed TV show is going to be called Night School. So the dark of the night of the soul. So it's sort of like we can do what Frank said so well, don't stop and keep going. Pretty simple. It's like marking the cycle of death and rebirth. So again, I would say Frank forgot to die. It's like the Akashic Records or busting open the Bardo.
Well, he didn't go quietly anyway. That's the main point.
Yeah, the compendium, everything ever happens, like all times are happening now, is something Frank said so well. Anybody have any closing comments or thoughts? I really thank you all. This has been truly enlightening for me.
I have a closing comment.
Go ahead.
The other day, I realized I was playing the Black Page #1 on the drums, and I realized something. It's almost a linear drum solo. It's almost fully linear. I think the thing is like, I don't know, a couple minutes long, 2.5 minutes long. And what that means is in drumming, do I have my shirt on? Yeah, see, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. That's that's a paradiddle, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. There's no two hands playing a surface at the same time. So we call that linear drumming, when you play this drum, that drum, this drum, this drum, that kick, without playing something else at the same time. So when you do that, we call that usually we have linear fills. So, you can be doing a rock groove or whatever, and then there's a fill, and you're not really playing two things at once, even though you're hearing all these notes. The Black Page has only 10 notes of all the little black dots that create the Black Page. There's probably only 10 notes that are two drums hitting at the same time. And that's kind of fascinating when you stop and think and you analyze that from you talk about the statistical density, and I'm just like, this was just like a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking, he was a drummer. He started off as a drummer, but how far did he get as a drummer to know the mechanics of a drum and the mechanics of these two bass drums? And there's a part in there that repeats where you have to play 3 bass drum notes with 1 bass drum pedal. That part there's those 3 in a row. That's hard to do with 1 drum pedal, So why would he make that 1 pedal? Like, why would he do that to Terry? Did he feel Terry could do it?
Did Terry use double pedals at that time? Do you know?
No, yes, he definitely used double kick on that.
Double bass drums, wasn't it?
Yeah, double bass drums.
Yeah.
But I don't think Terry played, like when I hear it, I can hear if you're using 2 bass drums or 1 bass drum. And he was using 1 bass drum because it's super even, it's super clean. I actually prefer to play that part with 2 bass drums because I think you can play it louder and more powerful, but you can hear it. It's 2 different like pedals or 2 different, drums. It's not 1 pedal. But the point of this is that I just think it's fascinating. I've never kind of stopped to look at it that way, that the whole thing is 1 drum after the other, after this drum. And it's, as you know, it's through composed. So it's this tom, that kick, this tom, that cymbal, that's it. But there's only a few times in there where, maybe there's like 15 total notes that are, or maybe more, maybe like 12. Jesus.
Dude,
well, the thing is,
Khalil, that was brilliant because there's 2 major things. He went out to Cal Arts to work on the Black Page with John Bergamo, and Bergamo comes out of that classical Indian drumming. So it is this weird phenomenon. When I saw rehearsal and Ainsley Dunbar stopped by, it's probably 80 or 84, and Frank stuck the Black Page score in front of Ainsley. And Ainsley just played as 4/4. You know, it was amazing because the band was playing. So the proof of what you just said is totally, if we ever heard a tape of that rehearsal, what did Ainsley do when he played the Black Page?
Yeah, because I heard that.
4/4.
What's that?
Huh?
It is in 4/4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, he did it more in that
More
4/4.
straight.
Yeah, he did it more straight. You don't think of Ainsley playing the Black Page. You
No.
could think of,
And you don't think of Ian Underwood playing the Black Page, but he played it at that show you and I went to.
yeah,
Remember that?
beautiful. That's right. Okay, anybody, that was really nice, Khalil. Anybody else have any closing comments?
I think
Questions?
it's time for a snack.
Gary and then Jess. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I just said I think it's time for a snack.
You like a
Yeah.
snack?
Yeah.
I just want to follow up on what Khalil was just saying, because this is the part where we continue learning about this stuff. And there are all these clues there that we can continually discover and learn more about.
Yeah.
The Black Page, you know, kind of like Black Water for you. I can be driven to tears by the melody of the Black Page, not only the rhythm, but just that melody and those chords. They're beautiful. I play that one at the airport too. It doesn't get recognized as much. I do it for myself, you know, but it's, the melody is one of the most beautiful melodies ever, isn't it? Doesn't everyone agree?
And it's not for the sake of trying to create a tricky melody. It's just that shit flows out of him in a way that that it's hard for me to comprehend.
Yeah. That's it.
Throw in
Go
here.
ahead.
Throw in here a little theme for maybe a future event, but I had the great privilege recently of talking to Ian Underwood about Little House I Used to Live In. Tyler knows about this. I've spoken to him about it because I'd spent years trying to play that piece and finally managed to play it to my satisfaction, almost. And anyway, so I was talking to Ian about this, and he said and showed me, not that I was able to follow his reasoning, but that there was a very close parallel between Little House I Used to Live In piano introduction and the Black Page, and he went through it, and I wasn't recording the conversation, so we have to put Tyler and him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something that shows how this works, because he was insistent that it's actually the same thing, just done differently, and
Nice.
I'm not musical enough to be able to explain what he said. But I sure would like to hear that explanation. So we'll get there.
Well, you know that one woman I
Recycling
interviewed.
thing Tyler often talks about is the recycling. And what was that word you used about him I thought was great? He can be pretty homophonic, right? Isn't that what you said the other day, Tyler, I believe?
Did
The
I?
word
I mean,
homophonic.
it's true, but yeah.
Yes, no, I know,
Yeah.
but it's more than that. It's the recycling aspect that which you illustrate so beautifully, is that everything is pretty simple actually when you break it down. It's just the way in which he put it together and in ways that you would never spot or imagine.
Yeah,
So
not to get too deep into it, but one thing that I found, there's very little material in a lot. He makes a lot of little. And even something like, I was looking at Sinister Footwear the other day, and that entire piece is based on a chromatically descending bass line, the whole thing. It just keeps going down a step, down a step, down a step. So, and the Black Page, there's like that little doo-dee-da-doo, doo-dee-da-doo, that little lick, that's in there everywhere.
Yep.
That's little like it's almost like a Coltrane pattern or something, like a 1, 2, 3, 5. He uses that all over in the Black Page. So he does it like backwards, he inverts it, all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
It's so deep.
So Simon, that's funny because the woman I interviewed who does the Black Page on the piano, she does Ruth's version from the movie. She listened to it 7 times and then she plays it on the piano. She was mentored by Ian Underwood because she happened to be at her high school reunion and Ian was there and she sat next to him and knew nothing about Zappa, but was a dedicated musician. And so she had a few meetings with Ian over Zoom. But what an intriguing, we could do this whole thing. Yeats, the poet, said, life is waiting for an event that never happens. Thank God this happened. McLuhan says, we're here to learn the secret songs that orchestrate the universe. And this has been a celebration of all of Frank's music. Two things, Zappa and music, two things we're all fond of. Anybody else, any closing comments? That was a beautiful subject to bring up, Khalil.
Well, in all honesty, this is going to sound kind of lame, but I feel a little bit lucky that I don't try to play Frank Zappa's music. It seems like it's a challenge and a burden. And Khalil, you describe it as being, athletic and a burden. I am totally lazy and I never try to play it.
Well, Andy, what's your instrument of choice?
Well, I play guitar and keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in bands where I'm both of those things, but I never work on it. And I think that the comments from some of you this evening make me think, oh, the people who try to play it, they have a totally different relationship with it. I described music as being like a warm shower earlier. I just let it shower over me. I don't try to become the plumber.
That's cool.
Good.
That's not a criticism. You understand?
Yeah, it's cool.
I'm not burdened by that desire. Put it
Well,
that
the
way.
world needs us musical plumbers.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, when I worked for Frank, we'd get loads of tapes of people playing Zappa's music, and they'd end up in these boxes out in the porch and get rained on. So I ended up using using these tapes as blanks to record my band. But sometimes I would listen, and there were some of the worst covers of Frank that you could imagine, but they were so fun to listen to because it was people exploring Frank's music. That's why he loved the Shags so much. He knew he wanted musicians to play it right, but he also appreciated the fact that you were just, exploring music and it happened to be his,
Okay, so this is a story that you have never told me, and there's a chance that you listened to my band in high school right there in Bloomington, Indiana, where Andy Holland teaches. Whipper Station, we did a version of Trying to Grow a Chin, and it was terrible. It was awesome. And I said, we got to send this to Zappa. So we did. And we don't know if it ever made it there or whatever.
Before we met on the Zappa hotline?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
or it may have been in the beginning. I mean, yeah, maybe right around the time we met on the Zappa hotline. And so wouldn't that be hilarious if you heard, this is terrible? And it was. It was
Straight over it. Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing I like to hear from Gerry every now and then. Tell me a story, and then he tells something like that, which is just awesome.
Well, thank you. I have very little compared to what's out there now. The internet is so loaded with people talking about Frank, and it's quite exciting actually, but it's hard to consume it all. So I don't know if anyone will ever watch our ZappatistaSalons, but this was really fun. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Gerry.
Thank you, Gerry.
Everybody.
Thank you, Gerry. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everybody.
Tyler.
Good seeing you, Simon.
Yeah. Hi.
I'll be writing you soon.
Happy holidays.